I'm Sam,
And this is Gabe.
and this is Coaster Wars.
All right, today we have the battle at Six Flags Great America. We have two roller coasters we're picking from this park. Two really good roller coasters. Two coasters that I would say are both intense. Kind of similar but also different in their own ways. I think these coasters are more similar than I originally expected them to be.
That's a very good point, especially considering the different ways that these two coasters are built. They really are sort of similar in what they do to you as a rider, which is really interesting. And I think it'll be really fun to compare between these two.
Definitely the two most intense coasters at Six Flags Great America, I think I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah, two very very intense roller coasters.
I think the only thing that might be just as intense, and we hate this thing, but the S&S free spin. If you get spinning on that thing on Joker, that thing really takes it out of you. At least for me.
We don't talk about free spins here. Those coasters don't exist. Okay, on this podcast, and we don't talk about them because they're not fun. I don't care what anybody says. They're not enjoyable. They're not fun, and I don't like riding them.
Yeah, we'll ride them once to get our credit, and then we're kind of like, all right, what else have we got here?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how people like those roller coasters. I don't understand it. I really don't.
Let's get back into our episode. Why don't you introduce our two coasters?
All right. In the red corner, standing at a height of 100 feet and reaching a top speed of 50 miles per hour. Hailing from the farm fields of Illinois and the B&M gym, it is Batman. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 165 feet, reaching a top speed of 72 miles per hour. Hailing from the farm fields of Illinois and the RMC gym, it is Goliath. Let the fight begin. All right, are these our number 9 coasters now? Are we at number 9? What number are we at?
I don't even know. Give me like a second. Our number 8. These are our number 8 coasters.
Number 8. Okay, so my number 8 coaster is Goliath.
And my number 8 is the original Batman ride at Six Flags Great America.
The OG gangster Batman.
Yes.
Two really, really good rides. Which one do you want to talk about first? I'll let you pick this time.
We talk about mine a lot, I feel like, so let's talk about yours first. Let's talk about Goliath, the one that I have no reason for talking
Okay. So Goliath is a very interesting coaster. It is not your typical RMC. So most RMCs are a redesign or a reconstruction of an already existing roller coaster, where they bring in their iBox track, they make it more intense. Goliath is interesting for two reasons. Number one, it is a ground up construction, and number two, it is not iBox track. It is their steel topper wooden track, which is really cool because this makes this a full wooden roller coaster instead of a hybrid like a lot of the other RMCs.
Yeah, to explain roller coaster construction just a little bit, a traditional wooden roller coaster, what it does is it takes layered wood and then puts a steel plate on top of that to make the track for a roller coaster. What RMC's iBox track is its wooden supports with an actual metal. It kind of looks like an eye shape that the train wheels then hug onto. But with their steel topper track, it's the exact same thing that I described before with the wooden roller coaster. But what it does is it takes a metal box and puts it all the way around the layered wood to make it a little bit more sturdy.
Basically, what it does is it increases the strength of the wooden track to include inversions and more forces that you wouldn't find normally on a wooden roller coaster. Another good example of RMC's steel topper wooden track would be Outlaw Run out at Silver Dollar City, which is the triple barrel roller coaster that everybody knows about, I'm pretty sure. Goliath, not so much. It gets hidden a little bit in this amusement park, I think. There's a lot of other really good roller coasters here, But Goliath is still one of the best at Great America, and I think it does get a little bit underrated.
Oh yeah, me and Gabe talk about this a lot with Six Flags Great America, is that it has an amazing lineup. A lot of really great coasters, but as a result of that, they also really don't have a single coaster that's like their flagship ride. It's not like Top Thrill at Cedar Point or maybe like the Beast at Kings Island. They don't have like one ride that's like this is their ride. So it kind of just falls in with the lineup like all the other rides do.
Yeah, it's and like I said this in my Six Flags Great America review video on my YouTube channel. Um, Six Flags Great America has four roller coasters you could really argue are the best in the park. You got Goliath, you got Raging Bull, you got Max Force, and then you could definitely throw your roller coaster Batman the Ride into the
Oh yeah.
mix as well. And you could even include American Eagle if you're a super big fan of wooden roller coasters. You can include Superman Ultimate Flight. A lot of people really love that roller coaster. Not me personally, but I know other people do. You got Vertical Velocity, which is an Intamin Impulse, which is an awesome roller coaster as well. It's really tough to pick out what is the best, especially depending on what you like in a roller coaster and what you prefer. They don't have the King Ka or the El Toro. They don't have Carowinds has Fury 325. You could say Hershey Park has Wildcats Revenge. That's the best or best ride in the park. Where when you go to Six Flags Great America, every ride is so good, but none of them are ultra elite category, unfortunately. So it's hard for this park sometimes to get put on the same level as like Magic Mountain or Great Adventure or even Kings Island or Cedar Point.
Yeah, and then to get back to the coaster, it kind of makes the reputation of that ride suffer because it isn't the greatest and latest thing in that park when in reality Goliath is actually a really good ride.
Yeah, Goliath is one of my favorite. It makes my my list here, my top 15. It is, like I said, a severely underrated ride. I think the biggest thing that hurts Goliath is its overall length. You're only looking at just over 3,000 feet of track, and its top speed is 72 miles an hour, so it covers that 3,000 feet of track really quick.
Oh yeah.
Which is usually the biggest complaint about Goliath is that there's just not enough there for an ultra elite roller coaster. But I always look at Goliath a little bit differently. I said, yes, this roller coaster is shorter than maybe a Steel Vengeance or, longer roller coasters with longer layouts. But every element on this roller coaster is amazing. There's not an element on here that you can go, oh, well, it's there, but it's not really that fun, or I wish they would have did something else in this section. Every element on this roller coaster hits you incredibly hard and gives you a lot of creative and different forces. And I think it still becomes a complete ride experience, even though it's only 3,000 feet of track, because every element is so good.
Well, and then if you also look at this ride in the sort of history of RMC, RMC didn't start building their own or designing their own roller coasters until 2011. Well, Goliath was built in 2014. That was only 3 years into their roller coaster venture. I think it is a pretty gosh darn good attempt. And I think it was a stepping stone into some of the RMCs that we have today.
Well, it really pushed the envelope for what RMC was looking to do. Six Flags Great America is a very interesting amusement park because it is Six Flags testing grounds. And the reason I say that is because you have Batman, which is the very first invert ever. So they're like, we'll try it out at Six Flags Great America. You got Raging Bull, which is one of the first B&M hypers ever. And they're like, we'll try it out at Great America. You have X-Flight, which is one of the very first B&M wing coasters. Oh, we'll try it out at Great America. And you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Six Flags Great America is kind of the testing ground for the Six Flags chain. It's really, I don't know how that happens. But, so it's kind of amazing that they still have a great of a lineup as they do, considering they're getting a lot of prototypes or newer ride types. But yeah, so when they got Goliath, this was at the forefront of RMC's development as a roller coaster manufacturer. This is before they became the perfect thing that you see down in Florida and in Cedar Point with Steel Vengeance, and they've gone overseas and built some really amazing roller coasters. This came before all of that. This was their kind of their starting off point after Outlaw Run and their very first coaster, the New Texas Giant, down at Six Flags Over Texas. This was kind of the next step in their evolution, which is a really cool thing to have at this park.
Well, to go into this ride experience, you want to talk about the layout of this ride real quick?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So like I was talking about, it is a shorter layout, only 3,000 feet of track. But the coolest thing, or one of my favorite things about this roller coaster, it stands at 165 feet, but the drop is almost 200. It's
Oh.
180 feet, which gives you that top speed of 72 miles per hour. This is almost a hyper coaster. That's what I want people to realize. You're only 20 feet shy of being a hyper roller coaster, which makes the pacing on this roller coaster absolutely freaking insane. So anyway, so you drop off the lift hill, which is an 85-degree drop. That's right, it's steeper than 90 degrees, which is awesome. And after that, you dive into the first entrance into the tunnel, and you pop up into a massive overbanked turn, which gives you some really good airtime in the exit. And you drop down, and you pop up into the first of a straight airtime hill, which is massive ejector moment. It's one of the best moments on the roller coaster. And after that, you follow into one of the most unique inversions on an RMC, and that is the dive loop. Now, there's only one other roller coaster that features a dive loop from RMC, which is why I say it's unique. But this gives you an awesome dose of hang time, because when you get to the top of the dive loop, the train loses a really good amount of speed, and it just hangs you there before diving back towards the ground and giving you some awesome G-forces. After that, you pop up into one of my favorite inversions of all time, and that is the zero-G stall. And for some reason, it is just like, I swear to God, it's the longest zero-G stall I've ever experienced. It just hangs you there for like 8 seconds. I know that's an over-exaggeration, but that's honestly what it feels like. And that's when you dive down into the tunnel for a second time before popping up into a smaller outer banked overbanked turn. And you get some nice air time as you head back towards the ground. Kind of a wave turn at the end there. Before popping up into the final airtime moment, which has a little bit of laterals as well as it turns to the right. And that's when you hit the final brakes. So you're really looking only at 6 elements total. Am I looking at that right? So you have the lift hill, which would be 1. You have a outer or overbank turn. You have an airtime hill, so you're at 3. The dive loop would be 4. The zero-G stall is 5. And then the final overbanked turn would be 6. So there's not a lot to this roller coaster, but like I said, every element is brought out to the extreme of what that element could possibly do, which what makes this roller coaster so great, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Honestly, the only complaint I have about this ride is the fact that it's so short, but I think it also is a testament to how good that layout is, because that is, I'm like, I want there to be more. I need this to be twice as long as it is, because I want to experience this twice as long as it is. And we have to talk about that Jersey stall, because like you said, it just, I'm convinced that the coaster just stops. I'm like, there's got to be some mechanism there that gets it going again, because like you said, you just sit there. And I talk about, like, you have a natural instinct on when certain elements should end, and then it just doesn't. You're still sitting there upside down, just hanging out, I guess, and then it finally goes again, and it messes with your head is what it does.
To compare it to some other stalls, I've ridden a couple other RMC roller coasters, and when you compare it to the stall on Goliath, they're not the same thing, because every time I go into another stall, from whether it's Intamin or RMC, which both do zero-G stalls really, really well, they're always so short. I always like, oh man, I wish it was as long as the one on Goliath, because it's just, like you said, and I say it, like I said 8 seconds, which I know is a huge exaggeration. It's probably only 2 or 3, but it just feels like it just goes on forever and ever, and you're just hanging there upside down. And the coolest thing about it for me is that when we talk about a zero G stall, it isn't hang time. So hang time is where you're actually hanging and you're resting against the restraint. That's not what this is. It flips you upside down, but because it's on like an arc, you're actually floating upside down between the restraint and the seat. You're not touching either part of the train, and it literally feels like you're in outer space, like just floating. Like that's what it feels like. And no other roller coaster that I've ridden that has a stall has given me that same feeling of floating in outer space. That's the best way to explain it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to talk about another thing with RMC a little bit is, and our last RMC was one of their Raptor models, which has like the worst restraints ever on a roller coaster. Well, there are other RMCs like their wooden coasters or their hybrid coasters. Their restraints are so much better. They don't have overhead ones. What they are is they're like waist ones and shin ones, and then they usually have a seatbelt. But like it is some of the most comfortable restraints I've had on a wooden coaster ever.
Uh, I'm gonna disagree with you. I hate RMC
Oh,
restraints. I really do.
I
I
suppose.
I have a lot larger legs than you do.
That's a good point.
And I have longer legs too. I don't fit in RMCs at all. Um, it's always a struggle. Anytime I get an RMC, I remember we were at Cedar Point and we were on Steel Vengeance, and they had to check my restraint like 3 times before they set the train because I just don't fit in the way my body is shaped and the way it's constructed. I just don't fit in RMC trains. So I hate them. I absolutely hate RMC trains, whether it's the Raptor model or their double wide for their hybrids. I just don't like them. I will say this. The Generation 2 RMCs that you see on the new ones. So, Steel Vengeance has the second generation. The Iron Gwazi has the second generation. Those are worse than the original ones, I think. At least for me. So, like, Goliath has the original RMC trains, the first generation, which I think are a little bit better. But yeah, I am not a fan. And for larger people or just people with large legs, they don't necessarily have to be big, but even if you're muscly and you have large legs, RMC restraints suck. That's just the simple fact of it. But I can look at this roller coaster and look past the restraints and still put it at number 8 on my list. That's how good it is.
This is the one time where I wish that this was a visual medium so everyone could just see kind of the difference in size it is when it comes to me and Gabe. Because Gabe's a big dude. Like, he's tall, he's got broad shoulders, he got long legs. I am an average size female, so I'm like 5'5", I'm average weight, like, we're two very different sized people.
Yeah, well, I have massive legs. Like, it's just how it is. I just have huge thighs and huge calves. Like, seriously, like my calves are the size of most people's thighs. Like, let's
Yes,
just be
I can
honest
attest to this.
here. So like, it's just my body type and the way I'm constructed. I just don't fit in RMC restraints. It's just a simple fact.
Yes.
But like I said, I can still look past that, and I absolutely love Goliath. It's one of my favorite. I talk it up all the time. I've said numerous times I think Goliath is better than Steel Vengeance, but let's not get into that at this moment in time. But with that, I think we should transition over into one of your personal favorites, and that is Batman the Ride. The original, the OG gangster Batman, the first one ever constructed, the first invert ever constructed, and one of the best inverts out there.
So Batman the Ride, like Gabe said, it is the first B&M invert. It was opened in May 9th of 1992 at Six Flags Great America. It's a total track length of 2,700 feet, which is not a lot of track. And I feel like it's a wrong number. Hold on a second. I gotta look this up.
No, that's probably pretty accurate. They're not long layouts. The thing you have to remember about the Batman rides is there's no mid-course brake run, which will make a roller coaster feel longer in ride experience, in my opinion, when there is no mid course.
No,
These aren't very long roller coasters. I know that for a fact.
2,700 feet. Oh my gosh. It speaks to the layout of these rides though, because in 2,700 feet of track, it has 5 inversions. And
We use a word, and me and you both use this word for certain roller coasters that we get off. We call them head rush roller coasters,
oh
and
yeah.
this is one of
Oh my
them.
gosh. This is the kind of Batman, as much as I love it and I love the crazy G's that it pulls and how it whips you through this layout, but it's usually one where we ride it maybe like in the beginning of the day and then you got to take a break. This is not a re-rideable ride. So you got to take a little break in between re-riding this ride cuz holy bejesus. And something we have to talk about with the Batman ride is inevitably we have to talk about the Batman clones. And as I've stated before in this podcast, me and Gabe have ridden other Batman clones. And unfortunately, they're never as good. Never as good. The only one I think me and Gabe ever said came close was the Batman clone at Six Flags Great Adventure. And I didn't necessarily think it was better, but I think it might have been as good. And I don't know if it was running good that day or if it always runs like that, but that was the only one that came close.
The one at Great Adventure, I swear to God, was like just freshly greased or something when we rode it. But a good example of clones that are not as good. Down at Six Flags Fiesta, Texas, they have a roller coaster called Goliath. Now, this is not the one we've been talking about in the podcast. This is a different Goliath. But it's really funny because it has the Goliath name, but it is the layout of the original Batman, which is kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that one ran like way slower than the original Batman at Great America. And that's a good example of one that I thought wasn't nearly as good as the original Batman.
Oh yeah. To speak to why they aren't as good is part of it is because the original Batman was designed to fit in the space that it was put in. So like it was made to fit in that area. And so one of our things that we talk about is it has a lot more terrain interaction than a lot of the clones are, because obviously the other clones were kind of just we have to pick this up and put it here and it's not going to interact the same way. So it feels a lot more like you're weaving in and out and around the ground that really adds a certain element to this ride. And then again, like I don't know what it is. It might even just be the age of the ride or something, but it runs just so much more fast. And when it does that on an invert, it makes it so much more intense.
I think it's one of those things where they struck gold with the original design of the Batman ride, that they wanted to replicate the original awesomeness that this ride was at other parks. But the problem with that is when you reconstruct a ride, you know, maybe this turn isn't quite as tight or this loop isn't as tall by, you know, a little bit here and there. And yeah, you can just go off the blueprints, but everybody, I know this because I used to work at a mill. Everybody who welds differently. You know, everybody who builds and constructs with metal does it just a little bit different. And that little bit of a difference you wouldn't think would matter in a ride experience, but it really does. The other thing with Batman the Ride is it is surrounded by trees. It is surrounded by trees all over the amusement park. That's one cool thing I like about Great America is the trees at the park. So it makes it feel like it runs faster when the trees are 6 inches from your feet. And then, like you said too, with the terrain interaction, it gets a lot closer to the ground. So a lot of the clones are what you call parking lot coasters, where they took out a section of the parking lot to construct the ride. And in order to do that and to get the layout the same, they had to raise the coaster up maybe 10 or 15 feet to make sure for your ground clearances and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then being farther away from the ground makes it feel like it's running slower. I know it's an optical illusion, but in your brain, you notice it and you feel it in the roller coaster. I think that's the biggest difference, is that this one just feels like it runs faster, and for that reason, it makes it feel like the inversions are more intense.
Yeah.
So, but why don't you dive right into the layout?
That's just what I was gonna say. So this starts with a chain lift into a 100-foot curved drop, which leads into the first vertical loop of the ride, which then leads into a 0G roll, which leads into another vertical loop with a wide right, oh my god, I cannot talk. A wide right turn into a quick left turn, which leads you into the corkscrew, which leads into a very tight turnaround, which then leads into the final brake run of the ride, and you come into the station. So it still
Yeah, the
amazes me that in two, basically 3,000 feet of track, they have 5 inversions. That's just insanity to me.
well, this is another roller coaster. Comparing it to Goliath, that is insane pacing wise, and as well as is very intense. These are two roller coasters that run incredibly fast. Each element is back to back to back to back. Both roller coasters don't have, time for you to rest, time for you to think about what's going on in the roller coaster. And for that reason, that's why we said at the beginning they're very similar roller coasters. But they're different in how they achieve those things.
Yes.
I think the biggest difference is Batman the Ride's only 100 feet, where Goliath is 180 feet.
Yes.
Um, which I never realized that. Talking about Goliath. Well, the thing with Goliath is, like I said, it's only 160 feet tall, but the drop goes below grade. So when you walk up to Goliath, it's just this massive,
Oh,
such an intimidating roller coaster, and you when you're looking all the way up 160 feet in the air, you're like, man, that's a massive roller coaster, but you're still not looking at the entire first drop.
oh yeah.
um, and Batman the Ride is completely different. You kind of walk up to it and you go, oh, it's a smaller roller coaster. It's not going to be as intense, maybe. More of a family ride, and that's not true at all. This is an extreme thrill roller coaster that just puts you through the paces and just
Oh yeah.
rips your feet off. I've seen tennis shoes, like full tennis shoes that are laced on, go
Oh yeah.
flying off on this roller coaster. Because it is that intense, and it really pushes some really good forces, and that's what Batman the Ride is all about, is G forces, where Goliath is a little bit more on the other opposite end of the spectrum, where you have ejector air time and then hang time.
Yes.
So Batman the Ride wants to push you into the seat, and Goliath wants to throw you out of the seat.
Oh yeah. Um, Something I do have to ask about, and I realized that I didn't do much research on this. Have you ever been able to ride Batman backwards?
No, so I do know it's one of the roller coasters. They do flip around and do run backwards.
Yes.
I've never. This is something that's weird for me to say. As many times as I've been to Six Flags Great America, I've never experienced any of their roller coasters backwards.
No,
None of
see,
them.
I am the same way. And what's so silly to me is I think I've been there on days when it has been running backwards, but only recently did I start using the Flash Pass to like get multiple rides on all the coasters. So like, and of course when it's running backwards, like everybody and their brother is in line for this ride. So I haven't ridden it backwards either, and I wonder how that changes the experience on this. I can only just imagine it must make it even more intense, which seems impossible to me, but it somehow must.
Yeah, I would imagine riding it backwards. I guess the biggest thing about riding it backwards is that every element you're looking the wrong way, so you can't really plan for what's coming ahead. And like I said, I've never done it. I've never experienced it, so I don't know how it is or what it's like. But I can imagine it would be a really fun ride experience.
Yeah. So, and then another thing that I feel like we have to talk about with Batman is the history. We did mention that it was the first B&M invert. So this coaster has achieved ace, what is it called? Ace, I don't, landmark
It's
status.
Yep, it's Ace historical landmark. Which Ace is the American Coaster Enthusiast Association. For that people that don't know.
Yes. And I looked it up, and out of the hundreds of coasters that are in the US, only 46 of them have been awarded landmark status. And basically, what this is just an award for being an extremely historical coaster. A lot of I feel like, well, a lot of aero coasters would have this status because they're just so historically important to the history of roller coasters. So it's me and Gabe didn't even know that it was an ace historical landmark. And the thing is when they get this achievement, they get a plaque, and I think it's kind of hidden over by like the sign for Batman. And we're not really focused on the sign for Batman. We're more focused on getting in line. So we haven't seen the plaque before, but it's really cool to see that it has been awarded that, and is an extremely important part of roller coaster history.
Yeah, well, it's not just the first B&M invert, it's the first invert ever from any company. And I think that's probably why it gets that rating. A lot of people think the suspended coasters from Arrow were the first inverts, but they're not considered an inverted roller coaster. They're considered suspended, hanging below the track, where inverts, the actual train is attached physically to the rails on the track, and that's the biggest difference. But with that, we've reached our 30-minute mark. So, would you like to pick your winner in this battle?
Oh, this one is such a hard one for me. I do have Goliath on my list and I'll be talking about it later, but the problem is that I just really, really love Batman a lot. But Goliath is also a really good ride. I think what would what sells this for me, and I didn't get to talk to it much in the episode, and I won't go into it in depth, would probably just be the theming. And that's Batman cheating a little bit because I just really like Batman. So like that's a really sort of dumb thing to kind of tick it over for me, but this is what it is. It's where my heart lies. So I think Batman wins for me only by just a little bit because they're both really good coasters. They're both favorites at the
Yeah. I think you already know where I'm going with this one, but inverts aren't my favorite.
no.
They never have been. They never will be. Batman the Ride did not make my top 15. It is a really good roller coaster. Do not knock that. But for me personally, I prefer inversions. I prefer ejector airtime. I prefer the massive first drop that Goliath features. And then Goliath has my second inversion. It's my second favorite inversion of all time in that zero G stall. And for that reason alone, just for that zero G stall, I'm going to take Goliath over Batman in this one. I think Batman is a really good roller coaster, obviously, because they cloned it more than any other ride in history. But it's just that. It's just a really good ride. I think Goliath is a elite roller coaster, verging on ultra elite. I think it's highly underrated. And I just got to take Goliath in this one.
I think this is a really good one that shows very how much. Well, I feel like we've had a lot of battles that do this, but it shows how different our tastes are in roller coasters. And I think that really just goes to show anyone listening that, like, you're allowed to like whatever the heck you want, and nobody else can tell you different. And if you like a coaster, then you like a coaster, and nobody can tell you different.
But with that, let's talk about our next week episode for a little bit. We're going to be calling our next episode the Boomer versus the Zoomer. Two roller coasters that are in Ohio, the state of Ohio. Two roller coasters that are, one's very old, obviously. One's very new. One is wooden. One is steel. One is, a hallmark at that amusement park. The other one's a little bit newer, but also a hallmark at that amusement park. Two really good roller coasters, though. Two very good ones.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a fun episode, and I just gotta say I can't take credit for any of the names. Gabe names all the episodes, and I instantly suggested that name. I was like, oh, that's absolutely the episode of the title. So everyone
Yep.
come back and join us next week for the Boomer versus the Zoomer.